I've got a track guide here for you guys. It's going to be the Corvette C8.R GTE at Watkins Glen boot. It's preparation for the 6 hours of Watkins Glen that'll be next weekend, I believe. A few guys in my league are planning on running it. We ran to Daytona 24, but not many people do a lot of route. Definitely not sport car road racing. So a lot have done NASCAR at Watkins Glen. You're familiar with the Cup layout. This layout adds a couple turns. But I'm just going to go through 4 laps here. First lap I'll go through pretty slow. Just overall braking points, gears for each turn. This car is nice because it actually lets you see what gear you're in here on the dash, unlike the NASCAR where I was trying to have to remember. This is completing lap 9. You look over here on the right. My lap 9 time was actually decent, but completing lap 8, I think I smashed this wall on the outside. I have damage turned off just for the video, but I think I hit the inside wall too, so I just got a really slow start to the lap. So I'll just show you these last 4 laps. Obviously pretty consistent on time, all within 5/10 of one another. Looks like fuel lasts about 33, 34 laps here, which puts you pretty much right at an hour. So that'll be your normal stint. But without further ado, this is coming out of what would be final turn. I don't even know the numbering off the top of my head. Maybe turn 11. It says there's 12 turns, so maybe it's turn 12 for this layout. But this turn here going on to the main straight. So you exit out pretty much as close as you're comfortable with getting to the left there to just maximize your speed. Coming down the start-finish line here. You do get all the way up to 6th gear. You barely use 6th gear here, but you definitely use it. Turn 1's easy. You got all these braking markers. I tend to brake essentially in line with the 200. Once I pass the 200, I'm starting to brake. Some people may want to brake more like 250 in between these two signs, whatever you're comfortable with. I get all the way down to 3rd gear. I think one of these laps I do it in 4th gear to see if there's any difference. I noticed watching an old VRS video that they were using 4th gear carrying a ton of speed. But I think overall 3rd gear is probably going to be a better gear to use here. Also noticed, yeah, so it's a little bit before this little dark patch in the tracks where the 200 sign is. I mean, you can see I'm already braking a little bit before this 200, so I'm probably closer to like the 250 sign anyways. Straight line, I do have a little bit of lockup there. You can hear the tire lockup. Try and get all the braking done in a straight line before I turn in. You can see all these red lights lit up. That means that I locked a wheel up, in case anyone's ever curious. You got lights over here as well. I think it's traction control 1 and traction control 2. But I think they also light up like that, all like that. All 5 of them, I should say, if there is a wheel lockup. And then under acceleration, if you break a tire loose, I think the number of them that lights up tells you how much traction control is actually kicking in. You want to try and get as far to the right here as possible. Even up onto that white curb is fine. You don't really upset the car here. So pretty much this entire area here up until you reach the grass is fair game. You can obviously really abuse it here if you want to and if you're comfortable with it, or you can just try and keep it within this yellow line here. I think I tend to maybe run up on the curb a little bit, but I don't push it too far. I've seen people get really wide, and then you try and funnel back in to get in before the grass, and if somebody gets under you, creates incidents. Not really worth the risk. Up to 4th gear. This stretch of the S's is flat out. If you're behind a car, you may get some error where you got to lift a little bit. Also, a little reminder in this car that when the second light lights up, that's your shift point. If you wait longer than that, all of this will turn red. and that's actually a late shift. So you want to do it pretty much as the second LEDs lighting up red. You'll get up to 6th gear here. Keep it wide. You can get up on this curb a little bit. Just try not to get into the grass here. It'll sometimes upset the car, and you don't want to launch yourself back into this wall here and create an issue. But up to 6th gear. For one of the trickier turns, this is just where you're confident in doing it. Again, there's a lot of brake markers here. I think I tend to be between the 4 and 300, maybe closer to the 300. A little bit after the 300, there's actually a dark patch on the track where I think the track's starting to rubber in. So you can use all those as kind of reference points. So I'm just starting to brake here, which is right as I'm passing 300. So yeah, pretty much right at 300. This little dark patch here is where I'm talking about. It's starting to get rubbered in. Obviously braking before that. You can also, I mean, I don't know what kind of person you are, but you can use this little green tint thingamajiggy here. And obviously you're braking significantly before that. It can be a little bit trickier if you have traffic next to you, yada, yada, yada. Some people call this the inner loop. Some people call it the bus stop. I don't know which side I fall on. I think I call it a bus stop now, but I think I used to call it the inner loop. I don't know. Whatever. But very high speed section here. You're going to get down to 4th gear pretty quickly. 6th down to 4th. The car will get maybe a little bit unstable under braking there. But you can really abuse these curbs quite a bit. But you gotta be a little bit careful if you cut it too much here. It will be an off track. You can see it kind of jostled the car there a little bit, upsets it a little bit. But then you're going to get back to the left here, and same thing. You can, I mean, this is not an off track, but you can see how much of the track I'm using. I mean, I got tires in the grass there. Yeah, and that's not an off track. But as you can see, it kind of, that curb's a little rough, so it kind of does push my car out to the right a little bit. Makes it a little unstable. Just got to be a little careful of it. But same thing, essentially the third part of it, you're going to want to try and clip as much of this white as possible. And then here, you might barely get your right sides. Here, I'm back to max throttle here. I'm actually back to max throttle pretty much as I'm hitting the third white strip. I'll go back, watch this at full speed just so you can kind of see it without me slowing it down. All right, so into what I'm going to call the carousel, this giant dark patch transition on the track. Maybe trail brake a little bit, and by trail brake I mean you're getting maybe 10% brake, just kind of set the car a little bit and then easing off of it. You don't use a ton of brake for this turn. As you can see, I quickly punch it, and then I'm just out of the throttle, a little bit of throttle, until I reach the point that I'm going to commit to fully back into the throttle. This is a little bit different than the NASCAR version because you're going out to the left here, so you have quite the runoff area that you can actually use here. So I'm still checking in and out of the throttle a little bit here. Try and avoid getting it actually on the curbing if possible. It may upset the car a little bit if you do. So right here, I'm back to full throttle for the rest of the turn. And I'm just going to carry it all the way out to the left. So all this white strip here is fair game. The more you use of it, the quicker you're probably going to be. Just try and not be on it when you get to the grass section because it will try and grab the tires and pull you towards it. So just know that. All right, you get up to 5th gear here really quickly. This turn is pretty tricky. If I were to say this is one of the turns that I see people spin out on their own the most, and I think it's just people try and carry too much speed into it. So I'm braking before this dark patch on the track. I'm going to get it all the way down to 3rd gear from here. So right about here, yeah. So maybe 2 or 3 car lengths before that. You may want to start a little bit further back, and as you grow more and more comfortable. Looks like I get about 60% braking. You don't have any super duper heavy braking zones here that I can think of where you're using 80%. I mean, this car doesn't have ABS, so you got to be wary of that at all times. Down to 3rd. So this part of the track, you do not want to put tires on this white curbing. It will upset the car. You want to try and get them right on the yellow line here. So pretty much to here. I'm fully committed back to the throttle right here. And you're just going to accelerate out, apex, or let it track out all the way to the white curb on the right. Sometimes you might push it a little bit wider than that. That is tricky because the curbing isn't as wide as some of the other sections, and then this grass comes up immediately after, and there's definitely been multiple times I've done this, and it just tries to pull you towards the blue wall here on the right, so I would advise against doing that. Get up to 4th gear, 200 brake sign, the Zippo sign here. It's the point I use. This turn, I feel like it's the turn I probably give up the most speed in. I try and get too close to the inside too early. It's more of a later apex turn. Like if you look at it up here, it's a perfect hairpin, but you want to apex more like 3/4 into the turn to really maximize your drive off. Down to 2nd gear. The lighter patch here is actually a pretty good contour for a rough line that you want to take, so you can see how it kind of funnels and gets narrower and narrower to kind of give you an idea where you're going to apex at. So about there's where I'm actually aiming to apex, and then as you can see, I'm actually all the way back in the throttle here. You gotta feather the throttle here sometimes a little bit. With traction control 5, it's not as bad. But if you're using less traction control help, it may try and shut the power down as you get back into it, as it's preventing a slide. Just kind of have asphalt here, so just out to the left to maximize the track as much as possible. Figure all the way up to 5th here. Yep. Another turn where the 200 brake marker is the point I use. So you got this turn, the turn before, and actually turn 1. I think I used the 200 marker for all those. So that makes it a little bit easier for you. So 200, about 50, 60% brake. Obviously, you don't want to lock it up. All the way down to 2nd gear here. You want to get pretty much this patch that's in the middle is a pretty good line to use. You want to get a little bit further to the right, but you don't want to hit the curb. If you look at this curb, it kind of, the way it's angled, it's pretty steep here, and it will upset the car and kind of push it a little bit to the left, so it's best to avoid it. Hard back into throttle. So this is setting up for what pretty much everybody, I think, says is the worst turn on the track. And there's a few reasons for it. For starters, you look at it here and you don't really have a brake marker. Now I'm looking at it pause. Maybe at the end of this fence on both sides might be a decent point, I'll have to see where I kind of just do this turn by feel. Yeah, so I'm actually a little bit even past that. Just barely. So, I mean, you could potentially use that as just kind of an obscure thing to look at on the track. But you stay in third gear for here, and then you're going to second gear. So what really makes this turn suck is it's off camber. So what I mean by that is the track is essentially angled down, so the track falls away from you. So it's just like the car doesn't want to turn at all. And then you have bad curbing on the left side that you want to completely avoid, because this curb will absolutely upset the car and try and launch you to the right. So you want to avoid it at all costs. You can see how steep it is and how bumpy it is. It's just to be avoided. I hit it there, and you can see how it kind of jolts the car. But you're going to exit out to the right here, out to the white curbing, setting up for the second to last turn. Let me just go back, let you watch this at full speed so you can kind of see it. Up to fourth gear here. I don't brake for this turn. So I just let out of the throttle for I'll get up to fourth gear here, and I'll start a turn in at the 100 sign. But I don't brake. I probably stay out of the throttle for 1 or 2 seconds, and then I get back in it, carrying as much speed out to the curbing on the right. So I start my turn in at the 100, get as far to the inside as possible. Try and avoid the curb. I don't think it's the end of the world if you touch this curb. You can see it's kind of straight and then curve and then straight and then curve. Somewhere like right in here is where you want to try and apex it. Back in the throttle, use as much of that runoff as possible. Again, don't get off in the dirt. Bad things happen. And then you want to get it all the way to the left side of the pavement as possible. I start braking at the end of this black tire wall here. And I leave it in fourth gear here. You actually don't need to shift at all. Your goal is to carry a lot of speed here. So I start braking at that tire wall, and then right where this grass starts to angle back out is where I try and start my turn in. Maybe a tick after that even, because you don't want to touch the curb here. On the right side, it's another section that will upset the car and it'll push you out to the left, because you're already trying to use a bunch of runoff area there on the left. So if you touch that curb, it may put you into the wall if you're not careful. That's a common spot that like even NASCAR and whatnot has issues with pancaking that wall on exit. If I don't hit it there, using the runoff area, I wouldn't go much more than that. You don't want to hit those tires. But that's the end of the lap here. So I'm going to let a few laps play through at full speed. I know this video is a little bit long. I'm talking quite a bit. But there's going to be a couple sections that I may pause it and rewind it real quick, because I know there's a few things that happened in these few laps that I kind of want to touch on a little bit. Yeah, so here's where I try and hold fourth gear and run out a little bit wider. I don't think I gained really any time over using third gear though. So there I actually ran too wide. I wanted to get closer to the curbing, so you can hear me kind of have to get out of it. Another tricky thing about this turn here is you don't want to turn in too early because you really want to maximize outside of the track apex, and then back to the outside of the track. If you get turn in too early, it just don't carry the speed. The turn's tricky. It is what it is. So red LEDs are when it's locking up. It's actually blue LEDs when you start using some traction control. So there is a little bit in that turn. Yeah, you can see it light up a little bit here, and you can hear it kind of kicking in there. So it went flashed one, and then it flashed a second one for a little bit of time. So it wasn't a ton of assist, but it was there. And the traction control literally just cuts the power to prevent the slide or spin out. That final turn there was probably the best one I did. And I think this last lap, there was one part where I really had the traction control kick in. You can see it flashing a little bit there on the exit of turn one. Not too bad. I probably kick it up to 4 or 5 bars in one of these turns. Just trying to get back into the throttle way too hard. But yeah, at the end of this video, if you guys have any questions or anything, feel free to ask them. I'm definitely willing to help out. Thing is, this next turn's where the traction control really kicks in. You can hear it fluttering. It was actually kicking in both of them. I guess they both were up to like 3 or so. I'll rewind it again so you can kind of hear what it sounds like. But yeah, I definitely was in the throttle too hard here. You can hear it just kind of like chattering, I guess, be the good term to use for it. I get really close to those tires there. That's closer than what you want to, honestly. I don't know how close I was, but I know it was super close. Woo! Yeah, don't do that. Alright, it's gonna be the end of this video. Let me know if you have any questions.